Welcome to Defender. I'm your host, David Marsh, and today we have an excellent show lined up for you with special guest, Michael Marin. All right, I'd like to welcome Michael Marin from Dexcom to the show. He is currently heading up global security at Dexcom and is the San Diego chapter chair for ASIS. Highlights of Michael's background include district manager for Securitas, senior security program manager at Global Elite Group, regional client portfolio director at Allied Universal, managing director and CEO at Proactive Defense Solutions, senior instructor for the United States Military Training Program for the African Contingency Operations Training, and serving as a Marine for 10 years. I could go on, Michael. There's a heck of a bio, but welcome to the Defender Podcast.
Thank you very much, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, man. Excited to have you on. So, with that background, I'd love to hear your story on just kind of what led you into the security industry, and obviously a pretty extensive career before you really got to where you're at right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it starts off like most people that were in the military, right? I did my Marine Corps service, like you mentioned. Left service, went to the police academy in Florida, and spent 2 years as a sheriff until I was recruited by DSS, and got into it that way. Really, that was kind of like my first start into security, understanding a little bit more in depth of, vulnerability, risk assessments, how those impact business, right, and diplomacy, if you will.
Yeah.
And so, it really kind of integrated. And then after leaving, federal services, getting into the private side was kind of the next evolution, next, steps to it. But it was still hard, like, separation of, military service and what you're going to do next. And same thing for law enforcement and federal services is, what's the next mission, right? What do I have that I can, give and still keep on giving, if you will, right? And kind of really just finding that mission in life of what I want to do next, right? I mean, it's kind of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think that's kind of what took me, through there and learning and being humble, and really saying, I'll start as a security officer again, right? I'll start at the bottom and work my way up because I think I have what it takes to learn. I'm a quick learner, and understanding what corporate life and corporate society looks like or looks for. And there it was. That was kind of the start of, the upward mountain climbing, if you will.
What's it like going from that high octane military life into the civilian, mode, and then just trying to, like you said, you're sort of starting from, zero again, and then sort of building back up, but you have the skill set that you're bringing with you, and that, you know a lot more than sort of, I'm sure you're letting on at that point, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, I think it goes back to ego. I think ego, understanding and putting ego in check, understanding that, I do bring things to the table, but I still have to learn, and be able to kind of gut check yourself, right? And say, hey, okay, learn first, right? There's a saying that we, always say in the Marine Corps, and once you get up into leadership roles, especially, is you have to be a good follower before you're a good leader. And I think that rings true in everything. So, I've brought in new people into my organization, and I always tell them, hey, humble yourself, sit down with the officers, sit down with, whoever it is, learn their job, because you're going to get more respect that way. You're going to understand fully and grasp it, right? And there's that, being a master, at none, right? And really understanding kind of how you have to be multifaceted, multidisciplined, and you're never going to be perfect at all of them. But if you don't have the basics, you're never going to be good at any of them, right? And I think that was kind of, what I learned from some of my mentors and leadership, and how I got really involved more and more with, being a better leader and transitioning completely.
That's great advice, man. I think being humble, it's just a rare thing nowadays. People want to start at the top, especially, just differences in generations and stuff. I think that's a big sea change that I'm seeing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
I have a teenager and one that just turned 22, so it's like it's a different mentality, you know.
Yep. Instant gratification.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. So, you know, we went through the school of hard knocks a lot of times, but I think it makes you who you are. You know, you go through those struggles and being humble and not having that instant gratification, like you said, that's what stretches you and makes you who you are. So it's a good
Absolutely.
thing. You know, transitioning from military to civilian. So you start again on that, and again, the military background's pretty incredible. So how did that help you in the security industry? You know, you get into the private sector, and you know, what was that like? And then how did you use those skill sets to kind of catapult you forward?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is you go to boot camp and it's forced discipline, if you will, right? You have
Yeah,
somebody there that tells you when to eat, when to sleep, what to drink, what not to drink. Like you have that structure in discipline, but it's not real discipline, right? Because it's forced discipline. I think working at it every day, right, and making yourself truly disciplined to do the right thing all the time is really what is key, at least in my perspective. It really makes you go after it every single day, right?
yeah,
It makes you have drive, right? Ambition, and those, sometimes people see that ambition as a bad thing, and for me, it's always been a good thing, right? I won't stop here. I won't be a person that's just like, okay, I'm just going to stay here for the next 10 years and try to retire at the same thing. I want to move up. I want to show my worth. And like I said, I think we're mostly alpha males in this industry, and of course there's alpha females as well, but we're all alpha and we're trying to achieve things, right? And I think finding that mission, finding that goal, finding something that truly means something was always key. And so especially now where the company I'm with treats you well, cares about security, and it's doing something that really means something,
mm,
right? It helps you as a protector really go out there and do your job every day and say, hey, I want these guys to be worried about making this medical device to save lives, to change lives. And I'm not just here going, I'm just going to collect a paycheck, right?
yeah.
And so I think that you have to really care about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean the security. I guess we're the sheepdogs, right? So we're
Absolutely.
out trying to protect everybody and thinking, as many steps ahead as we can, and being pretty analytical about it. And there's just a lot to it, but you're right. There's sort of this in the gut. There's just a desire for it, and it's fun. It's fun to know that what you do matters.
Absolutely.
But I love what you said though about that's just life in general. Having that discipline and sort of building that up. I mean, everyone has that struggle. I think every day is to maintain that and to build that if they haven't. And so those are some wise words, man. I think that's a big deal for sure.
Absolutely.
Now, I saw that you're at ASIS. What are you doing there, and what's sort of front and center for the group and what you want to get done there?
Absolutely. So I'm the current chair for ASIS here in San Diego, Chapter 16. And I get a question on this quite a bit. Like, what is it? What are you guys doing? How did you get involved? And really, it took me a long time to get involved with ASIS, because I remember when I was first looking in probably the early 2000s, ASIS was kind of the good old boys, very closed. It wasn't as diverse as it is now.
Yeah.
It was really, if you weren't part of it, that was it. Like if you try to break through the door and get in there and pick people's brains, it was like, I don't know you, man. Like, and so now it's really changed, right? We have diversity in age, sex, just so many different levels, all the different skill sets that we have that are included into what we do. So it's really nice seeing this and breaking into this area. But I think really is what we're talking about is that convergence of, the physical security side, cybersecurity side, and how you said, we had a little bit of a discussion before we started, is that understanding that these things kind of merge, right? It's a muddy area, but we have to learn how to collaborate with it, right? As we get into new technologies and with AI up and coming and really moving quickly, we have to adjust, right? And we have to look at the holistic approach of bringing everybody in, and that's all key stakeholders, customers, etc. So having these different verticals that we can discuss these topics is really what we're about, right? So we're bringing together end user practitioners, we're bringing together vendors and integrators and people in the technology space to all kind of get together and just have these conversations. And some of them are tough conversations where, it makes you think outside the box, right? It changes your opinion. And just really be innovative, right? And like you were saying, I think, we have to play chess, right? We have to try to think as many steps ahead. And as we create solutions, the bad guy's job is to create, more problems for us, right? And so that's why this field has just been, just immensely growing over the past, 20, 25 years. And there's so much more growth to come.
Oh, I think it's the boosters on the rocket are just going to hit with sort of this convergence. I'd say is interesting, but I'm a firm believer that the physical security world is definitely its own, and then cyber is its own, but they play together, and there might be some I wouldn't say a merger, but they're playing together more and more because Absolutely. Of all the devices are basically small computers, right?
Absolutely.
But we look at robotics and AI, like you're saying, and all this stuff that's coming down the pipe here, or is actually here. And then you're like, okay, well, what can I do with this tool? But always in reverse, like, okay, I have this problem. Is there anything out there that can help me reduce this cost? Or is there anything out there that can help me to mitigate this threat? And I think if you think of it like that, especially the manufacturers think of it like, think about all the different problems that are out there and how security professionals are trying to figure out, what's going to be the best fit. And, everyone's not trying to create Fort Knox, but at the same time, you have to have a good layered security, and putting all these things together it's extremely time consuming, which is one thing that we're trying to help out with, is just bringing things to the forefront, sort of a curated list of, here's the best of the best type of a approach. But there's a lot of data. There's no shortage of data to go through. And, but it's really interesting to see. And I like the IS aspect of it because I think it's good for younger people. I mean, it sounds like you similar, just sort of get in the security industry inadvertently almost, the way I got in was kind of crazy. But doing it on purpose and having the infrastructure to get in and like an organization like ASIS is pretty cool for somebody who's younger, and it's going to be a very high growth field to get in. So are you seeing a lot more younger people interested in getting the security market? What's your thoughts on that right now?
Yeah, I think there was it was a big boost, over the last 15 years, right? So we've had kind of that pendulum swing back and forth where a lot of people got into security to get into law enforcement, right? Mm. And now you're seeing a lot more people getting out of law enforcement to go into the corporate sector security. And then you had the stepping stone, which was, basic security officers, and them trying to move to law enforcement, right? And then over, obviously, the last probably 6 years to 10 years, we've really seen people kind of say, do I really want to be a law enforcement officer, right? And for obvious reasons, there's a lot of different turmoil and political, things going on around the world, and it's a thankless job, or it's not a thankful job, more times than none, right? Like you go out there, you're writing tickets, you're getting yelled at for it, right? Everybody's filming you, even when you do the right thing, you're not doing the right thing in somebody's eyes. You can't make everybody happy. So there's a lot of things that just come to light in what you're doing, and it's hard. It's a hard job. And so people are saying, and it goes back to that instant gratification we were discussing, is that people want instant gratification. People want to feel good about what they do and like what they do. And I think this job does provide that in a lot of different ways, right? It's such high growth that people can move up quickly if you're doing the right thing, if you have initiative, if you're going after it. And so I think people are seeing that now. So to your question, we're absolutely seeing a lot more growth. We have more youth involved curriculums and the teams now really recruiting from that side, right, and
Nice.
mentoring and get people ready. And I think to your point, ASIS, we have board certifications and courses that we do and accreditations. And so I think those are some of the stepping stones to becoming a true professional, right? And when it's board certified and there's people looking at it, and if you look on almost any major company, 100, 500 that are out there, one of the things that they look for when they're looking for management, supervisory, and director level skill sets is a CPP, a PSP certification from ASIS. So that tells you a lot about where we're going, right? People want to make sure that you're not just good on paper, or that you just don't have a pass, or you just don't, you're an ex or retired police officer, but that you have some skills and understanding of what's needed, right? The layered approach, right? And security in depth, just to name a few of those different skills that you have to have, along with the technological part of understanding what your vendor's doing, right? And not getting ripped off at every corner, right? Do you really need that? Is the infrastructure correct? So you get into that IT, you get into that information side, you get into the physical security realm. And so being well-rounded and having these certifications really is really building up our younger generation for this.
That's awesome. I mean, that's what we need as we continue to grow, and the industry is going to grow. It's going to take the next gen to come in and see the value in what we do, and so that's good to know. Now you work both as an integrator and now managing for a Fortune 50 company. Has that changed the way you interact with vendors? Do you think you have higher expectations for these guys now?
I think I have realistic expectations, right? Understanding both sides. I think I mentioned it earlier. I think it's a relationship goal, right? That you have to be firm, but you have to be realistic, right? And it's like things, if my boss tells me, hey, I need this huge project done tomorrow, that's not realistic, right? And there's some things that you can get done overnight. But a lot of big things like we're looking at in projects, whether it's installs, whether it's demo and replace, whatever the case may be, giving realistic timelines with knowing where we're at in supply chain, just being realistic and being a good partner is really what I've learned. But I do hold people accountable, right? And so there is some firmness that you have to have, especially as a client, right? You hear you kind of in different areas, whether it's vendor security that I've worked in or in integration space. I think the biggest thing is that we have to be realistic, and we have to set those terms. And we kind of, the saying, I guess, is, we know where the dead bodies are buried, right? So you can kind of pick through, what's realistic and what's not, and if there's smoke and mirrors or not. And so that's definitely helped me in being the client now and saying, hey, listen, like, let's be realistic. What is a real timeline, right? Because either way, I'm going to find out, right? Whether you tell me and we continue with this, good relationship, or I go to other sources, find out, the realism of it, and it's just going to hurt you and your integrity later on down the road.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what I've seen.
Yeah, I think having a baseline like that is important, where people are just upfront and here's where things are at, and it could be just a rookie thing for some salespeople sometimes, not realizing that there's a lot behind the scenes that has to happen, and you have to sell this stuff to your CFO. And once that happens, there's a lot of check marks that need to happen very quickly, especially if you're deploying something massively. Like if it's thousands of sites, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most frustrating thing today about researching a new product, new technology?
I think realism, right? I think that to your point about salespeople, they want to sell you this product. It's a great, and a lot of them are great products, right? But being realistic about it, what it can actually do, what it's going to cost you, not just for the system or the product or the hardware, whatever it is that you're utilizing, but also the back end support you're going to need to make it run the way that a demo is showing you, right? I think that that's a huge pain point. Longevity in a company, understanding why what makes you different from a legacy company, what
Right.
can you do different, and how are you going to stay around, right?
Yeah.
I think is another kind of point that we've really looked at, investing time in, and really understanding the product. And then I think the third part is saying, hey, listen, we're an open book. Like, here are some of the clients that we're going to utilize, and we'll set up a meeting with you on a one-on-one. You can go through, and they'll tell you what their pain points are, the realism of it, what they've had to do to get it put together. And I think the last thing would really be expectations and reality of what we go through. Is, if we're getting, I think to what you just mentioned is, we're asking money, and so a lot of it is a lot of money from our CFO and our champions in leadership. And really explaining to them, one, the return on investment on this product, and then two, having them understand that this has to go through a long process for most cases, right, to get a PO and to put that out. If it goes to RFP and it's not single source, how that looks like, and kind of give them a realistic timeline. I know a lot of these young salesmen out there, they're uppity. They want things done tomorrow. But that's just not the realism of what we're doing, right? I think being realistic and saying, hey, listen, we're in July now. After it goes through legal back and forth, after it goes through finance approval, after all these things, after it goes through, infrastructure review and infosec review and all these different review boards that, most of these big companies have, it might be the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter before you're actually going to see a PO cut and we're going to start this project.
Yep.
And so I think, again, being transparent and giving that feedback up front, and just saying, hey, these are expectations. Like, if you're going to hound me every single day, like, hey, do we have a PO cut? And it hasn't even went through legal yet, is defeating that relationship goal, right? For both of us.
Yeah, I think the communication aspect is really elusive for a lot of the salespeople. Just laying all that out way ahead of time. I think you like you were just saying, you have those communications. They're open. You understand. You put everything out there. And then just pestering is not gonna move the needle, but necessarily. Exactly. It might actually break the needle. So,
agreed.
So do you? I mean, that's sort of on the dovetail of this next kind of idea that I had, where that is a big difference though with security with Fortune 100 type companies. Is how these processes go. And there's a lot more checks and balances. These things don't happen overnight, and then the support level that needs to happen for a company like that is a different level set. I found that things can bubble up that it can be very, very important to that company in terms of some sort of requirement inside the company. Maybe it's a security feature or something. If the manufacturers don't listen to that, that could be goodbye, and they might move on. So what do you see in terms of sort of working with a Fortune 100 versus other companies?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the bureaucracy levels of getting through all the different areas is probably the biggest change and difference. It's a business, right? And so understanding how to sell it to your leadership, understanding the business levels and what the value it brings to the company and to the support of the customer, which is everybody for security. And most times,
right.
It's every person. It's not just the end user of the product or what the company's selling, but it's also everybody within the company internally. And so, understanding those things are really big points. And it makes real big decisions and just understanding that those bureaucracies and those checks and balances really make the difference in between a successful product rollout and a complete stall, right? Or a complete failure of your great idea, right? And sometimes it's a matter of starting small and saying, hey, listen, let's give a area where we do a pilot in, and it might not be headquarters. It might be a smaller area, right?
Sure.
But getting that first rollout to see how it works, and that always can help you make it scalable and make it to enterprise level down the road.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think having a pilot program a lot of times makes a lot of sense. Depending on what kind of technology it is, you can get that out there and show proof of concept, and they could even see the ROI on it. Depending on what kind of product it could be. But yeah, it's great advice. Starting small sometimes can pay off big time.
Absolutely.
Now, I was reading an article about an insider carrying SSD drives out of a facility, and it got me thinking about just the idea of corporate espionage. With anything with IP for a larger company has to be a big deal, and it's a big piece of security. So, what are some of the things that, again, with that chessboard and thinking ahead, what are some of the things that you have to think about with things like that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of over probably the last 10 years, but especially within the last few years with some of these countries and state funded terrorism and things like that.
Yeah.
We've really seen a boost in what we're seeing as far as intellectual property theft and IP and just the list goes on, and it's really troublesome because we can protect it from the physical aspect, we can protect it from the cyber aspect, but to your point, under GEG, I remember running the airport, they used to ask us, how do we make this place just the safest place on earth, right? Like, think about things like it was your own family, everyday traveling, like what would you want? And I'm like, yeah, I guess we're gonna have to lock the doors and close this place down, because that's the only way we're gonna be able to give 100% guarantee that this place stays safe, right?
Right.
And the reality is we take things from a risk-based approach and metric-based approach, and we say, what is the risk? What is the impact? Right? And we try to work around those things to develop a plan to be as secure as possible. And I think that's kind of where we have to kind of, play within that field to understand that.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of access control, like movement of a lot of employees going through. Yeah, you could have it really locked down, but the time that you're going to have a big long line of people that are waiting to get in the door. So that the freedom of movement of going in, but still having a security check and authentication is, you have that blend constantly.
Absolutely,
that's a hard thing.
It is
because you want to make everything super secure, but at the same time, backing off from Fort Knox, you have to look at threat assessments and how to mitigate those as best you can.
Yeah. And to go, just further in, like,
yeah.
I think a lot of it is the travel, looking at different areas, whether they're, organic growth, and a lot of times, acquisitional growth, and moving into different areas with higher threats and different spaces and regions, has really been kind of the big ticket item, how we travel, what we travel with, and looking at those IP things, and it's not just overseas, right? In our own country, we've seen it, right? Where, the charging stations at the airports, a long time ago, started with the Samsung chargers that were pulling information to advertise to you, 10 years ago, and now to where we are now, where it's just, loading, malware onto your device, and you're bringing that around, you're plugging that into your cubicles, into your offices, into your laptop or tablets, and so that vicious cycle of understanding that, and it goes into that, insider threat and what people are doing, whether they have, malice intent, whether they're being coerced. So there's a lot to look at, right? And I think it kind of all has that cycle of life, if you will. That we have insider threat, whether it's malicious or unintentional, and then that kind of goes into the cyberspace field, and then we protect it at a physical side to make sure people can't get into those fields. And so it really is kind of the cat and mouse constantly.
Yeah, and then you add in AI into this mix, where there's the sort of brute force break in, in terms of a lot of these systems and what it can do, kind of takes things to the next level.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, they could be great tools, right? So
Absolutely.
there's a sort of battle between the two sides of that, and it'll be curious how the physical security industry will use AI and robotics to address, certain types of threats and optimize things for employees as well as for visitors and things like that. Are you seeing anything currently that is catching your eye? I'm not talking about product wise, but just in terms of this technology coming in where it's actually usable
Uh,
for you guys?
Yeah, I think our biggest area is SOC analytics and kind of really ingesting information at a quicker speed
Yeah,
to be able to disseminate information at a quicker rate, right? Like you do a lot of data and metrics, and you look at some of the ingestion of information that comes through a SOC, and it's incredible. Like I
yeah,
don't think people really realize how much man hour it takes to kind of dig through this stuff and really analyze it, and how hard it is to really get it out in a seamless manner. And I think AI is really, really starting to affect that area where it's ingesting and helping us analyze and put things in front of us and really prioritize so that we can execute what's needed.
yeah. You think about all those alarms, in the old days of popping up, and everyone's just like, let me just mute those. So it's making sense of the data where it's just
Yeah.
popping up the real stuff, or it's just alarming on real threats because it's looking at things and saying, no, that's not an actual alarm. So that is kind of next level.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. I think that there's definitely some good components of that can help and be integrated into products very tightly at a good level. And so I'm excited to see, for whether it's a SOC or just in terms of cameras being smarter than traditional analytics were. I'm definitely looking forward to more and more of these products becoming available, and we'll be talking about them, of course. But as anything, we gotta sort of look at it and make sure the longevity of the companies and what they're doing behind the scenes to support customers. We have a pretty strict mandate, where it's made, in terms of what it's authorized for, and then the support mechanism.
Yeah.
So that's a big component for me, both sales and technical support, having that available for a client. That's kind of a have to have, type of thing. So,
Agreed.
um, in terms of robotics, we kind of hit the AI component. Are you seeing anything currently that, yeah, that could be helpful? Because you look at guard services and things like that, and that's a very expensive component,
It is.
in security. Are you seeing that as a viable component yet, or is that something still, further out in your mind, just in terms of the industry overall, not necessarily, where you're at?
Yeah, I think under current conditions with employment and really getting things back up to where they were, post COVID, if you will,
Yeah,
or pre COVID, we really are changing the schematics when we're talking about AI and robotics, right? And things that offset. I don't think we'll ever get rid of completely the human element. The
yeah,
same way when drones came in for war, we were like, oh, they're going to replace us, and obviously they haven't, right? And we've had drones and things like that in place for many years now. But I think, will they be force multipliers? Absolutely. Are they being utilized in areas that normally we would have a lot of difficulty with utilizing a human being? Absolutely, right? Things as simple as patrols in exteriors, right? Patrols in parking lots. I'd much rather a robot get hit by a car or something like that than a human being, right?
right.
Because it doubles the effect on liability, on man hours, on all these different critical parts. These robots don't have to eat, they don't have to sleep, they don't. I mean, even when they're on the charger, they're actually self-aware. That somebody comes up to them and starts talking to them, they'll engage, right? So there's just a lot of good things, and instead of paying here in California, obviously, our costs have went up as pay rates have moved up, and so instead of paying that 19, 20, $25 an hour, we're looking at a robot that costs $14 an hour or $13 an hour,
Right.
And we're getting time out of it. We're getting more productivity out of it. There's no emotion in it, right? So they're not having a bad day, right? Every day is the same day for them, and so it really is becoming that force multiplier decision making in where we have to go. And I think myself and several security professionals that I know of are really looking into this. Some have already engaged it and are having great return on investment on it. And so I think, as a whole, we are moving towards that, and I think within, not just security, but all industries. I think there was, I forget what area it was, but it's going to be the first McDonald's that's fully robotic integrated, right? You purchase at a kiosk, and the machines are back there, putting, not forgetting to say, hey, I don't want any pickles. They remember that, right? And and so it takes away some of that human error as well.
That's wild.
So yeah, it's really changing the schematics of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think of we were talking earlier about critical infrastructure, and you look at these remote sites. It's going to there's definitely great applications for robotics, and I think on the ground robotics is a big deal for everybody. So we're definitely looking at that and excited about these new technologies entering into it, and we're want to definitely talk about where it's a good fit.
Yeah.
In terms of we were talking a little bit about this earlier before we started. What are some of the attributes that you look for in a good system integrator, coming from being an integrator at the top level? Like, what are some of your top attributes that you look for these folks?
I think it goes back communication, one, right? Realistic goals. I think those are probably the two main ones, and then being innovative, right? Finding out those new things that are coming, seeing what the problem is for themselves, being inundated into what we do and what we are as a company, and coming back with solutions, right? Like, if I'm spending more time on finding solutions than you are, there's a problem, right?
Sure.
And that's what we're paying those vendors to do. So I think that's one of the big things. And it's getting tough again, even with, programmers and techs, keeping people happy, keeping them, gainfully employed. And so being realistic about what they're doing, what they can actually do is a huge part, right? Again, expectations is probably number one, in communication.
Yeah, I mean, not over promising and under delivering, right? That's not what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
With some of these recent cybersecurity exploits, recent meaning the last 10 years, we saw it with cameras, access control, and has that impacted your evaluation, for new technology before you bring it on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we collaborate quite a lot with our IT, cyber, architectural area of IT and cybersecurity, and we really do look at things. That we really expect them. All these new technologies to be SOC certified, to have all the certifications, to be able to get that over to us as soon as possible, so that we can start our reviews. Usually, IT area, cyber is usually where a lot of our programs are stalled in time. But if the new company or the technology that we're looking at comes to the table with all the certifications already done, it's not just in process, but they actually have it. They're showing it to you. They're showing how they protect their servers and what they do. Really helps us to defend, internally what we have. So I think we have absolutely are looking at it. We're collaborating and we're looking at from not just the physical side, but also the the technological side.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, just having all your ducks in a row before you start that process, unless you like to wait, that's a great thing to have done, right?
Absolutely.
So, especially again, working with a Fortune 100 company is different.
Yep.
There's just things that that punch list has to be done.
Yep.
And I think cybersecurity is a big part of it for sure now.
Absolutely. And there's prioritization, right? Like, you're not the only department, and obviously the customer, themselves are the biggest thing, right? So getting whatever the product is out that your company has, is always number one. So, if it comes to manufacturing or security, manufacturing is always going to win that. So making sure that you have all of this and you're forecasting kind of what you want to do for that next year, so that you can get the support you need in a timely manner on these projects is probably one of the top priorities that you should have, as a leader, is making sure that you put your ducks in a row. You make sure you have a game plan. You involve IT early on and tell them, hey, listen, I'm going to need this many man hours. This is what we're trying to accomplish. It's going to help you. It's going to help me. And really having them understand the project itself so that they can utilize the resources and get the resources if need be to support whatever projects you have up and coming.
That's great advice, Michael. That's a huge deal. You're talking inter-department. You're working with these guys, and you can't waste their time either. So
Absolutely.
It can't be a start and then, oh, hold on, I'm looking for this information now.
Yep.
And then they're on to the next thing.
Yeah. Put another ticket. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, exactly. You missed that opportunity. So, in terms of, you kind of have an idea of what we're building. What would you like to share with the Defender community, other security professionals that are kind of in the same boat as yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said earlier, is, gut check yourself, check your ego. I think Defender is doing a great thing by, bringing things into one place where you can find, what you're looking for, lessons learned. You shouldn't have to, make your own mistakes anymore, right? Like, things are up and coming and there's new risk and evolution of what's going on. But, being able to come together, understand the problem, understand other people's pain points will save you so much time in the long run, right? Like, I think, we're past the point where we just have to keep making mistakes to get better at something. I think that there's a lot of things that we can be preemptive with, proactive with, and really get out in front of things. And that's what we should be doing, as security professionals, right? And so, we've seen it with, things like I was discussing earlier, where, the old FBI behavioral division was really kind of on cue with, getting information in one centralized area and then sharing it to make sure that people had a place to go, a library, if you will, of, oh, hey, look, I'm having some of the same problems, right? And I think AI will be absolutely phenomenal in kind of scrolling through all this information and popping it up to you and saying, hey, listen, in your area, you've had, women of the same, age group, what they look like, what the topology, victimology looks like, etc., and then putting that under one plate and saying, you might have a problem, right? Communicate with the next state over because they're having the same problem, right? And in our case, in security, is looking at that from our pain points and having AI help us, ingest that information, analyze it, and push it to our front plate.
Yeah, I love that. What would you like to see, on Defender? Is there anything that you think we should be looking at or talking about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing right now is convergence. I think breaking out of all the silos, right? And it's not just IT, cyber. I think all of our silos as key stakeholders, right, and understanding everybody, because security touches every part of the business, right? Whether it's HR, whether it's legal, whether it's finance, we have something to do with each and every one of those areas. And so I think really understanding how we break through those silos, what we need to do to organize that, how we start building a real relationship that's collaborative and positive, I think is something I'd like to see more of, and that's with Defender and ASIS and throughout our community, right? Be open, be mentors, and help each other. That's my message that I would want to get out, and so hopefully we're aligned.
That's awesome. Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate your time and for jumping on today. You're gonna have to come back on. There's a lot more to talk about, and I'm sure that anything that you'd like to communicate from ASIS out here to this community, that'd be great. So if there's anything you ever want to share, or there's meetups or anything like that, feel free to DM me and we'll hop on a call or something. But thanks a lot for joining me and for communicating to everybody on this channel that how important security is and how many people it touches in every department. And I think those were some great points you made.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, David. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Have a good one.
Take care, Michael. It was great speaking with Michael. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and hearing from other security professionals. If you're not already subscribed, please hit the links below, hit the notification bell, And until next time, this is David Marsh with Defender.